Welcome to the Cosmic Dispatch, a show about bodies, celestial and earthbound, time, experience, and the relationship between all of them. I'm your host, Cory Nakasue, and good afternoon, everybody. Hope you're all well on this June 11th, 2023. We have another big week of astrology on tap, but it's sneaky in its bigness, save for one transit that's pretty freaking obvious. But other than that, there's some stealthiness alongside some pretty typical Gemini briskness. In the second half of the show, I have Shea in the Catskills, author of the new book Tarot as Questions, joining me. And we're staying with this theme of question asking during Gemini season and really taking some time to understand the question as an art form, a tool, and a technology, and maybe even a sacred offering to spirit, ancestors, nature, or God, as in if you craft an amazing question, it's like a gift to whoever or whatever you're asking from. I mean, imagine if we took the understanding of the question into our relationships. Um, if we crafted something really beautiful, thoughtful, and profound, could we open someone's heart? Could we open someone's mind? Could we open someone's wallet? um, yeah. So it's something to think about. I think Shay will have some useful information for us. But before we get to that, and this week's astro weather, which is really interesting. Just want to say thanks to everyone who supports this show and gives us such great feedback. It really helps us guide the work that we do and grow it. So please continue to do that. Share your experiences, your musings, your questions, and give us show and guest recommendations by emailing us at thecosmicdispatch@gmail.com. And you can stay up to date with all of our content on Instagram. And please, please subscribe to the Cosmic Dispatch on YouTube if you're a visual person or if you like to follow along with a transcript. All right. Yeah. So there's housekeeping and time to dive right into the happenings of this week. So to start today, June 11th, this is a pretty big freaking day. The first big event of today involves Pluto and Mercury. After just a few months in Aquarius, Pluto is sliding back into Capricorn, and Pluto is retrograde right now, and it's returning to the scene of all the crimes. I know there were a lot that went down over the past couple of years and quite possibly the past decade. In general, I think we're going to notice a backing off on all the technology and social unrest and reorganization stories of the past few months, and a return to stories about governmental and economic infrastructure, the integrity of buildings and transportation systems, and the ongoing scrutiny of power. Who has it, who doesn't, who's losing it, who's gaining it. And this is different from the way Pluto in Aquarius is trying to reorganize social stratification. In Capricorn, Pluto isn't trying to reorganize anything so much as it's trying to obliterate what is weak or dysfunctional. And it does this by polarizing things. Pluto is not subtle. It wants to get to the bottom of something and then kill it. It's paving the way for the work it wants to do in Aquarius. So, as it slips back into the last degrees of Capricorn, um, Mercury in the very last degrees of Taurus, and this happened very early in the morning, it made a trine to Pluto, and then it entered Gemini a few minutes later. And this is a fast transit, but it's deep. It's sort of like doing a quick bit of surgery. But on this day, you can go quite deep with whatever you're working on, whether it's an investigation, a powerful move of some sort. I'm thinking this is like a chess move. A keen bit of strategy could cause a dramatic shift. So, this could be a revealing conversation or a bit of secret info that changes the game. And then it's done. And then Mercury can go on its merry way into its home sign of Gemini, getting back to being easy and breezy. Um, this also marks a dramatic end to a Mercury story. Mercury was in Taurus for an extended amount of time due to retrogrades. So, whatever your Mercury retrograde story was, it's now officially over. And you get to move and you get to think and you get to talk really quickly. Um, Things really pick up. And it's moving so fast right now that it only stays in Gemini for about 2 weeks before it moves on to Cancer. So use these next 2 weeks to juggle multiple things if you have to, or cast a wide net, because mobility will be greatly enhanced, coordination will be greatly enhanced, um, mental and physical agility. I mean, you'll be able to like go and do an obstacle course or a parkour course really easily. And you can like take me up on that if you want to. And as if that isn't enough, on the same day, the 11th, today, Venus in Leo squares Jupiter in Taurus. Now, this is the first of 3 squares that Venus and Jupiter are going to make this summer. There'll be another one in August, and the final one is in September. And for those of you who follow astrology content, you may have already heard rumors of a very sexy Venus retrograde summer, and this is one of the reasons. So pay attention to what happens this week, because this could be the beginning of your Venus square Jupiter story. And as usual, this can play out in a variety of ways and at different intensities depending on your natal chart and what's going on in your life. But when Venus and Jupiter get together, we're looking at sweetness, abundance, and benefits. And with the square, we're looking at a very active time with these things: active desire, active optimism, active celebration. Sounds good, right? I'll totally take that. And it really can be. Venus and Jupiter together are just gorgeous, sublime. But also, in a square aspect, we're looking at how these energies can get in each other's way and be counterproductive. And we're also dealing with retrogrades in the future meetups between these two. And those are more about the dark side of the planets. But as far as this week is concerned, with both planets direct, we're feeling Venus in Leo's love of celebration, instinct for pageantry, and desire to show itself. And it's bumping up against Jupiter in Taurus's body positivity, love of nature, art, and beauty, and buoyant optimism. And when they rub up against each other, it produces some friction. And some friction can be good and sexy and make things happen. This can be a very good time. And there might be a price. And so, um, as we all know, too much of a good thing or too much of a good time ceases to be a good time or a good thing, or it can be. So, whatever you're super excited about right now, enjoy. Go ahead. Just know that there are some rough landings with this one after the good time is over, or the amazingness you might be expecting might not live up to the hype. And that brings us to later in the week on June 15th, when Mercury squares Saturn. Now, Mercury is having conversations with the big guns of the zodiac. So, first Pluto, Lord of the Underworld, and then Saturn, the patriarch himself and Lord of Time. Now, Mercury is arguably one of the most important planets in the zodiac. Like nothing gets relayed, nothing gets conveyed, nothing moves without Mercury. And yet it's considered kind of a lightweight. But it has to be because it needs to move. It needs to be quick. It needs to do that obstacle course. And in Gemini, Mercury is going to want to tell some jokes and change the subject, and Saturn just is not in the mood. So, toward the end of the week, I see Mercury being a bit frustrated. Um, for a couple of days, it can't talk and think and process as fast as it wants to, and it might feel encumbered by the past or heavier emotions or limitations. And those are all symbolized by Saturn and Pisces. And I see Saturn and Pisces being very annoyed with Mercury buzzing about. And during the days that surround the 15th, I would try actually to tackle some weightier, heavier subjects. Like go ahead and have the harder conversations because in those circumstances, Mercury might make it easier. And what makes this even more frustrating is that by the time or by this time when Mercury and Saturn are making their square, Saturn is pretty much still. It's pretty much still right now. And that's because it's preparing for its station retrograde on the 17th. So we can see the summer retrogrades coming down the pipe like one at a time. And when Saturn pauses in preparation for its seeming backwards motion, remember the retrograde is an optical illusion, but symbolically, when it pauses, it's kind of marinating and soaking up all of the juices that make Saturn Saturn. Um, it's anchoring deeper into what it is. So we're looking at intensified restriction, slowness, resolve, and adherence to rules and traditions. And by the time it gets moving retrograde in its retrograde motion, it kind of loosens up, but it can also be very rigid. Its actions are uncoordinated. And that's what happens, during a retrograde. It's not always necessarily that the planet expresses the opposite of, what it usually expresses, or that it's weaker. You might hear a lot of these things if you follow astrology content. I don't find that's the case. I find it's more that it's just uncoordinated and kind of jerky. If you imagine, if any of you have ever taken the time to try to learn how to drive stick shift, you kind of have, these fits and starts. Sometimes it's smooth and then sometimes there's a hiccup. That's kind of what's happening, especially when these slower planets go retrograde. But it's also true that during its retrograde, all of those Saturnian qualities get internalized and they're up for review. So you can look at the house in your natal chart where Saturn is transiting and get a good idea about what kinds of things you may be trying to restructure, as in take apart and put back together, but differently. And Saturn ends its retrograde in November. So there's a whole Saturn retrograde story that we will be gearing up for as well. And we'll be talking a lot more about this over the next several months. And there's your week. It's a real mixed bag of powerful energies, and it's going to hit everyone a little differently. And I'd say the fixed signs, which would be Scorpio, Taurus, Aquarius, and Leo, are going to get more of the Jupiter Venus square vibes. And of course, the mutable signs are going to feel more of the Mercury Saturn situation. So, yeah, interesting week ahead. We need to take a short break. And when we come back, we'll be talking with Shea in the Catskills. You're listening to the Cosmic Dispatch. I'm your host, Cory Nakasue. And with me via Zoom today is Shea in the Catskills, creator of the new book, Tarot as Questions. How's it going, Shea?
Hi, Cory. Thank you so much for inviting me to be here. I'm really excited to talk to you today.
And me, you. It's so nice to meet you in this virtual way. I hope our paths cross in person at some point.
May
Um,
it be so.
I I don't see why not.
Right.
um, and could you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the work you do?
Sure. Thank you. Um, I'm Shea in the Catskills. I'm a queer artist and tarotist, intuition facilitator, pleasure activist, collaborator, and organizer. I've been living in the town of Shandaken in the Hudson Valley for almost 17 years. And I was an ordained monastic, a Zen Buddhist monastic, for several years. And I left the monastery in late 2019 to enter lay life, cue lockdown. And that has been part of my reentry. And so during the last 3.5 years, I've been developing the work that I do now, which is I'm a library clerk at the Olive Free Library. And then I'm also a tarot reader. I do one-on-one consults, and I also facilitate study groups, which is my favorite way to work with people. And I make things. So that's kind of the TLDR.
Okay. That's the quick and dirty. Um, so tell us about your latest creation, Tarot as Questions.
So Tarot as Questions is an art book that is being risographically printed by our mutual friend Aurora Brush of Cosmic Doghouse Press in Kingston, New York. And the project started last July, actually. I began writing about the arcana in Etel Cocoon's tarot deck called Tarot is Color. She was an occultist and a painter who created a tarot deck in the late 70s using very abstract imagery, basically color fields. And so I set up a procedure or a ritual um, where I would pull a card and write about it. And in 78 days, I had written about all 78 arcana. And my sort of entry point or frame for it was thinking about communicating the tarot's messages by asking questions, a way of bringing the arcana means hidden things or secrets or mysteries. And so to bring the arcana inside and use our own life and body, heart, mind as the guidebook instead of using someone else's meanings. And I say that as someone who basically wrote a tarot guidebook. And so during the course of creating kind of the introductory chapters for the book, I met Aurora. We connected, and she asked if I had any publishing projects as I was working on the introduction. And our collaboration has become a really important ingredient in the book. The Tarot as Questions as an art book published by Cosmic Doghouse Press is so much different than anything I could have imagined alone. And so our collaboration feels very much like an essential ingredient. Her color work and printing and just her mind and vision have really made it into a really beautiful workbook. It's an interactive book. And the idea is that people are participating in creating the book by curating their own meanings or answering the questions, and there's space in the book to do that. So, and it's being published literally as we speak. Aurora's printing it, and we hope to start shipping them out at the end of the month.
Wow, that sounds amazing. And it sounds like that's the best way to learn. I mean, just about anything is developing your own personal relationship with it. And then to have a guided way to record that. Wow, that's so special. I can't wait to take a look at it.
Me
Um,
too.
yeah, and we are kind of I'm in the pantheon of the Cosmic Doghouse Press as well. Aurora also printed my latest book, and yeah, it she contributes this it's like this alchemy.
Yes.
She takes all the ideas and the images, and then what's what I love about books in general, then you have something in your hand to hold, and it feels so magical. I mean, books are just magical. So
Yes.
because of that, um, fantastic. And so it's called Tarot as Questions. And during Gemini season, I've been exploring this this technology, this art that I think we so often take for granted. We're like so focused on the answer of the result of something, we don't usually take the time to like really craft our inquiry, or a point of entry into something. And so I was wondering, what your philosophy was about questions, or yeah, question asking as an art or practice.
Hmm. Yeah, I love what you've been doing during Gemini season with questions. And I just love the way you think about it and um, sort of attach your own importance to questions as a spiritual matter, as a spiritual and relational and social technology, really. And I think one way to talk about this is actually I have Mars and Gemini in the 12th house. And that has given me a lot of problems in my life. And I think that with this book and with really focusing on questions in my work, it's been a way of kind of transmuting that energy of Mars and Gemini from being sort of conflictual and reactive to being kind of curious and really seeing the honing and crafting of questions as its own uh, delicious practice. And that's something in my client work that we spend the first chunk of time of a reading doing, is really helping people formulate their question, because that is what the oracle is responding to. And the you've talked about this in other episodes this season, that often the first question that we think of is a surface question, and our real question, and I can say more about what a real question, what I mean by that, often is just a layer or two underneath. And asking ourselves, why do I want to know that, is one easy way of just getting right underneath. And we might need to ask that a couple times. And how do we know when we've landed on the quote unquote right question? In my opinion, the thing that makes the best question is the thing that matters most to us. And we know it because we feel it in our body. And, I generally, that sensation for me is like ginger ale tingles, like around my head. Some people, it's in their heart. Sometimes it's like a warmth in our groin, or our, there's some kind of something in our body that registers, this really matters to me. And those questions, when I work with clients and they ask a question like that, the message from the oracle is just unbelievable every time. So I really encourage people to spend time getting to the heart of the matter. And it can be helpful to have an interlocutor. And I think that's, as people who work with clients, we can help draw that out. It can be hard to do that by yourself. But in the book, I do have a chapter on questions as technology. And, questions open a portal, they create a lens, they can build a bridge, they can diffuse conflict. So to really not underestimate the power and usefulness of questions in terms of our being able to relate to ourselves and each other uh, in a healthy way.
Wow. I love everything that you said. And as someone who does a lot of client work, I find that actually like 80% of
Yes.
the work
Yes,
is
it is.
finding the question. And usually once we've found the question that like that you feel in your body, there we don't need to then like find, okay, now what's the answer. It's like everything was contained in that question. And I love this idea of a interlocutor, because once you travel down the road of questions, the deeper you go. I think sometimes people ask really surface questions because they understand the power of that portal, and you need someone to hold your hand, because like, and also they're with you, you're another person. And so sometimes people don't want to ask the real question they want to ask because they're ashamed. And so they tried, I think they ask a more a question that seems a little more palatable, because or not too revealing, and you're kind of there to like ensure them that it's okay and there's nothing to be ashamed about, to help them just find what they're truly. And it's vulnerable, right, to like to ask for something you truly want to know, because then it brings up, oh, what if I get rejected, what if I hear the wrong answer. And just to have an interlocutor and someone to just say it's okay, there's nothing to be ashamed about. This
I
is,
love this. Yes. I love your 80%. Yes. I would put the exact same percentage on really the reading is 80% the question, that the answer is contained in the question. Like, yes. People are often at the end of a reading, they say, can you just kind of summarize everything? Which is a great question. And I try to do that for people. And what I leave people with is in a moment where you're kind of in a moment of tension or confusion or not knowing, the question that we asked, just bring that right into your mind. Like, that question is your accompaniment. Like, it doesn't end with the reading. It's like the thing that you're seeking, that question will open the door in the way that it does in the reading. And I love what you're saying about the interlocutor as accompaniment. I hadn't really thought about it that way before, but it's so true, is that people do know that they are opening a portal and that they need witness and presence and care in that. And I actually am cognizant of not pushing people into a question that's going to like rupture their life. Like, I can tell sometimes that we don't need to ask that question. We can back it up a little bit and ask a question that's going to actually give you some space and make you feel empowered. And I'm like, how do we make it smaller, in a way so that it's more accessible? So yes, I just feel like such question resonance over here.
yes, I wish more people knew about this process before they go into any kind of like counseling with a tarot practitioner, an astrologer, or any kind of yeah, other counseling practice, because it would just save a lot of time. But I know it's like if that's the process, if that's where they're at, then going through that process was valuable work. But I know it can be hard for some people to see that, because you get impatient, you set aside this hour to talk to somebody and you hope you walk away with your answer. And so, but if I think if more people knew about this kind of preparation, I think they would get a lot more out of their sessions. And culturally, we are not taught to interact with our practitioners, like including doctors. Like, we just assume no one wants to really hear our questions about anything. And so I
It's
better
kind of
make,
like, just give it to
yeah,
me. Yeah.
exactly. And
I
so Yeah, go ahead.
I think also, it's different because as an astrologer, you have to actually really prepare and look at, whereas I build that 10 to 20 minutes into the reading that we're just going to like draw your question out and distill it. And, I don't have to do that kind of preparation. So I think for someone consulting with an astrologer to really give that some thought, what do you want to know and why? And also, I do teach a workshop, sort of my signature workshop is called Asking Good Questions. And so, there is a certain, and I do talk about the cultural framing is that we have cultural myths around, usually a curious woman unleashing the evils, into the world, Pandora's box and Eve and the apple and curiosity killed the cat. Like we are really conditioned to not ask, deep questions or points. So we can be forgiven for, not having it at the ready. And it's something that can be developed.
I love that. I didn't even think about Eve. And yeah, and the idioms like curiosity killed the cat, be careful what you wish for. Like all these, negative, like, oh my God, if
Or you
you
can't ask that. That's rude. That's,
yeah.
yeah, like that kind of. Mhm.
Well, and so this is interesting, and I'm so glad you shared your Mars placement. I have Mars in Gemini as well, and it took me a long time, and I still have to really work with it. I at many points in my life during various types of work that I do, um, I would go a little too deep, too hard, too fast because it was almost like I had the scalpel in my hand, which was the question, and I knew what I wanted to know, and I would just like plunge into it. And since I have developed more, I hope, finesse and nuance. And I'm wondering, as someone who has Mars in Gemini, if there wasn't that kind of energetic, combative, like almost compulsiveness with the question and wanting to know quickly and deeply.
Oh my gosh, so relatable. It's in my 12th house. And it's being, Mercury in my seventh house is overseeing matters in my Gemini 12th house. And so, you know, how I ended up at a monastery kind of makes sense. And I feel like when you were asking me this question, I was like, gosh, you should ask the people I used to live with. Did I go hard and fast and aggressive with questions? And yes, I was a pain. I was a pain in the butt. I was kind of, I think that I love you use the word finesse and it's sort of like having some nuance, like being able to hold the charge. Uh, I think I was chronically dysregulated when I was living there, actually. And I think that being able to hold that Mars charge and being able to kind of channel it more intentionally, that has really taken some time and maturity. I'm 47. So, uh, and I didn't even start to approach that till I was in my 40s to be able to. And I also experienced it as definitely compulsive and definitely like a mind that is never still. So being a professional meditator was extremely challenging because the my mind is always moving by its nature.
So yeah, and I have a couple. I know a couple people who listen to the show who have Mars in Gemini, and one of them has Mars in Gemini in the 12th house. So yeah, if you're listening, like you have company, you're not
Yeah. It
alone.
gets better. It gets better,
Yeah,
really.
and it's a maturity thing, and same thing with me. I'm 51, and it wasn't until like my 40s where I started to even think, oh, well, feedback from other people. It's like, could you not just like cut me open and flay me right now? It's like, oh,
Wow,
I
I feel so seen. I feel so seen. Yeah.
was just I'm just I thought we were just having a conversation. It's like, nope, too deep, too much. Stop.
Yes.
I'm like,
Yes.
oh, okay. Um, but like I love the phrase you use, hold the charge, because that's what it feels like. It's just I need to breathe and just pace myself and then try to listen in all the ways, like list watch them, see what try to gauge what they're ready for, be sensitive. Um, and also, you're a self-described pleasure activist. And how do you bring pleasure activism into the work you do?
I love that question. So that comes from Adrienne Marie Brown, who wrote a book called Pleasure Activism, published by AK Press. Check it out. And I think that this applies to so many things, but how I apply it, particularly in my tarot practice and in my tarot work that I do with other people, is, and I actually tell people, let your practice be a pleasure. And in my experience, I am permeable, I am receptive, I can integrate, digest, and metabolize when I feel good. And I think that having spent so many years in a tradition, you know, the first noble truth is life is suffering. And the practice is you're going to sit and not move. And you're going to watch your mind. It's a very intense, you're going to wake up at this time, you're going to eat this. I mean, it's a high control environment. And so leaving and actually being able to take my time to do everything and to do pleasure research, what do I actually enjoy? It was like a whole study. It's a continuing study. What do I prefer? I mean, in Zen, it's like having preferences is like, the disease of the mind. There's actually a teaching that has that exact quote in it. And so to actually lean into my preferences and pleasures, to ask myself, how could I make myself more comfortable right now? And to really encourage people who I work with in tarot to let your association with your tarot deck be pleasurable. Do I like to listen to music? How do I like to do this? What do I like to have as a beverage? So that, and anything that doesn't feel good, just like don't do that. Because the thing is, nobody cares if you're practicing tarot or not. So you can actually kind of afford, in a way, to have this linkage between your tarot practice and pleasure research. And the messages that come through when I am regulated and relaxed, I feel like I've been able to integrate so much of what happened at the monastery just by learning how to relax and give myself pleasure.
Excellent. Excellent. Beautiful, beautiful answer. This is so informative and helpful. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, more with Shea and the Catskills. You're listening to the Cosmic Dispatch. I'm your host, Cory Nakasue, and with me in the studio via Zoom is Shea and the Catskills, creator of the new book Tarot as Questions. Um, and so, yeah, we talked a little bit about your um, your Mars placement, Mars in Gemini. Um, I was wondering what sign your Mercury is in.
My sun, moon, and Mercury are in my seventh house Capricorn.
Cap. Oh, interesting. Okay, I was just curious.
Yeah, this Pluto transit, was scoured through my seventh house for the last however many years, 15 years. I'm ready for it to leave soon.
Yeah, on the day that it went back into Capricorn.
When you mentioned that it went back into Capricorn and you were talking about infrastructure and transportation systems, I thought about the highway collapse of I-95 in Philadelphia this morning. I thought there's some Pluto back in Capricorn.
It's, sometimes astrology can be very metaphorical, and sometimes
Yeah.
it's just literal. Like the crumbling of buildings and and train derailments and yeah. So that was yeah, I thought about that. Um and so since we're bringing in Gemini and Mercury, it is Gemini season. Mercury just entered Gemini. Um and it had that meet up with Pluto very early in the morning while Pluto went back into Capricorn. Um so I was wondering if you could share with us, here's like the educational portion of the show, what tarot card corresponds with Gemini?
So the tarot card that corresponds with Gemini in the major arcana is the Lover's card, major arcana 6. So last year, 2022, was a lover's year. We were all having this lover's experience. And we can think about the Lover's arcana is basically major arcana 1 to 5. The magician, the high priestess, the empress, the emperor, and the hierophant are kind of like our families of origin, our socialization and conditioning, um, how the overculture informs us, religious and institutional socialization. And the 6th, the lovers, is where we begin to identify our own desires, our own preferences. We begin to tune into our attraction to things that maybe we were taught we shouldn't be or isn't what we're supposed to want. It's a kind of individuation process. And it's also, Gemini is the twins. So this mirroring of ourselves in the world. And so, one way I like to think about the lovers is as our relational interstitial selves. So, we are kind of individual skin bags on the one hand, and at the same time, we are relational beings. Both of those things are true. And something I think about with this arcana and our interstitial selves is in some ways, I think that the culture that we live in really warps and disrupts our capacity to be in right relationship with everything, ourselves, each other, the land. And so, working with the Lover's arcana, working with our relational self, working with relationship at the most available micro level, we are with ourselves 24/7, 365. So, how are we relating to ourselves? What do our relationships feel like? What do we want them to feel like? How are we in relationship with the physical so-called objects that we live with every day? Do we recognize that they have a life of their own? And if not, how might we invite a sort of relationality with the material world? And so there's a lot of really juicy generative work that can get done in the realm of the lovers. And, we can look at it in a very sort of narrow heteronormative box, and we can completely just take that box away and see how large and complex and life-giving relationship is and can be.
Mm, wow, that was beautiful. Yeah, that read on the Lover's card and like, well, one of the symbols of Gemini is a it's a boy and girl set of twins. But if we like move away from gender and we look at, they are twins, but they're not reflecting like the exact, mirror image of each other, or maybe mirror image is the wrong thing to say. But it's it's the synthesis of a masculine energy or a masculine principle and a feminine energy or feminine principle. And then, when we're looking at masculine and feminine and talking about it in this non-gendered way, we're really just talking about positive and negative, yin and yang, innies, outies, um, like what's going out, what's coming in, and how the two things are not opposite or really separate at all. They are part of a whole. And yeah, so much I feel you're right on relationally in our culture. Like, it's like no one wants us to know that. It's like if we see something that is different, that is not me. That is separate from me. Or I can, vilify it or make it a nemesis or something. But
Yes.
yeah.
I love that. And I think that, to think about the way that other people, other beings have pieces of our story and healing, that there's things that we can't see by ourselves. There is no personal liberation. We need each other to really be fully human, to rehumanize ourselves. And so to just see in some ways, to ask the question, like, what if everything was our twin? What if, everything had some, and not some piece that we need to like extract, but just some facet of life or ourselves that we can't otherwise see?
Mm, yeah, that's really powerful. Um, yeah, and then there's this whole, I don't want to get too in the weeds here, but there's this whole question I've been thinking a lot about this week for some reason. It's, is there a self? Like, is there a true sovereign self that exists in isolation from anything else? And I've been thinking, no, I think we all have a self, but it doesn't reside in my, you know, closed off meat sack. It's my self is activated by whatever it's in relationship to. And that's
Mm,
something I've been toying around with in my head.
I love that whole inquiry. That we're alone is like the greatest lie we've ever been told, and it makes me think of Sophie Strand's work, about how many beings are literally inside our body, that we're never alone, and that the idea that we could isolate any part of ourselves as some single essential self is kind of, you know, and yet the culture really assures us that that is the case, that we are separate beings.
Whew, yeah. But yeah, I think Sophie Strand somehow either just I she's been on the show before, and also I look at her social media, and it always like sets off like a thought that I become obsessed with for like the week that just
Yeah.
like goes
Yeah.
on and on and on. And speaking of the week, and I guess I think you have your cards there with you. Um, would you like to pull a card for us to work with for this week of June 11th?
Sure. I'm just going to like randomly cut my deck and hold up what comes out. So here we have the Daughter of Pentacles, or in other decks, we would call it the Page of Pentacles. And this is I'm looking at the Way Home Tarot deck, one of my faves. And so the Daughter of Pentacles, or the Page of Pentacles, the daughters and pages are the youngsters of the court. So what they lack in kind of finesse or mastery or facility or experience, they make up for in curiosity and enthusiasm and kind of sincerity and eagerness. They're beginners. But they're not beginners at the beginning of the suit. They're not an ace, right? So they come after the 10. So the Daughter of Pentacles is studying the material world, studying a student of the earth element, a student of resources. So something for the week to maybe think about is to ask ourselves, how are we using our resources? In our culture, we immediately think of money, but time is a resource, beauty is a resource, relationships are a resource, a sense of security, stability, and groundedness are resources. And so, what are we doing with our resources? How are we using them? How do we feel about what we find out when we ask that question. Is there a way that we would like to be using them differently? How so? And so the Daughter of Pentacles really invites us to be students of our resources and to invite a kind of curiosity and trial and error mindset. Being willing to, there's this phrase in Zen, mistakes are learning. So just always learning, observing cause and effect. I like to think of the pages as observers of cause and effect. And so, how can we be students of our resources this week is maybe what I would leave people with.
That's so perfect for, what's going on with Venus right now. Venus is one of the things we look to see, what do we have? What do we have to work with? Um, so our time is coming to a close, and I would love for you to share when your book is coming out, how to get it. I don't know if you're going to be doing any events or like a launch or anything like that.
I'm too much of an introvert to do a launch, but the book is available for order at Cosmic Doghouse Press. And if you order it now, we'll be shipping them at the end of the month. And I'm going to be teaching a workshop over Zoom on Tuesday, June 20th at 5:30 p.m. And that's using tarot to work with the dead. That's a 90-minute Zoom workshop. And then I'm going to be doing in-person tarot circles at Signet's Way in Kingston starting at the end of this month. So on Thursday, June 29th from 6 to 7:30, I'll be at Signet's Way doing my first tarot circle there. And I'll be there on the last Thursday of every month.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah,
I'm gonna try to come to that if
that
I
would be
can.
amazing. I would love to see you there.
And so, okay, so and that's an in-person small group, and
Yep.
you just like bring your own deck?
Bring a deck and like a journal, something to write with. And all of everything I just said is on my website at sheaandthecatskills.com. So you can find everything there. And I want to really thank you for this. Has been such a delicious conversation. It's been great to talk to you about all of these things.
I would like to talk to you some more. I think this is like there are many deeper layers underneath the ones that we just touched upon. Um, but so valuable. Thank you so much, Shay, for joining us. And I just want to let all of you know that all of Shay's information will be in our show notes and in the archives. And you can check out Instagram later when we put all the info about this episode up on social media. And yeah, I think that's going to do it for today. I hope everyone has a great week. Consider your resources. What are you doing with them? Are you holding on too tight? Are you frittering them away? Like, how do you manage them? How do you feel about them? And do they bring you pleasure? Do you enjoy them? Do you ignore them? So many questions to to ask. Another thing to really think about this week. So I will see you next time, same place, same time. Take it easy. Bye bye.